Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We're looking into the digital revolution and what's taking place in the crazy business world, consumer world, new, remote from everywhere world that we're going into. And our guest today is John Foley, who is the founder of the Cloud Database Report. John's looking into things especially about how this new world of exploding data is happening, the role that data is playing in business and our daily lives and so forth, and how companies are trying to make the most out of the data they have and how that ties into their business strategies. John, welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. It's always great to have you.
Hello, Bob. Thank you. And hello to all of the Cloud Wars listeners. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, John, first, I want you to just mention a little bit about a couple of things that you're focusing on with Cloud Database Report and where people can find your work. And then also, John, this sort of almost straight up line that's coming on here with the growth of data and so forth. If we thought it was, a challenge over the past couple of years, I think you've got some insights into how, we haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, great, Bob. Thank you. So Cloud Database Report is going full speed ahead. We were launched in the first quarter, and the news reporting, our in-depth report, our newsletter are all off and running. We'll be launching a podcast shortly as well that lives on the Cloud Wars website. So a lot of exciting things happening. The database industry is, likewise going full speed ahead. Cloud databases. As you and I have discussed, there's more than 700 databases in the world. And as we talked about recently, 75%, Gartner is estimating that 75% of databases will be migrated to the cloud or launched in the cloud by the end of next year. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of new platforms and cloud services that work to do all of this, and the Cloud Database Report is, week in and week out. That's what we're covering.
So, John, this thing, I think you described it with some of your notes here, is the data growth is a one-way street, right? There's no going back. It's not leveling off. It's not. What did the guy say 115 years ago at the U.S. Patent Office? He said, we can close the patent office because everything that can be invented has been invented. I think from your observation, John, it sounds like we're just at the beginning stages of this data explosion.
I'd like to talk about that today, Bob. Last time you and I spoke about this, I kind of ended our conversation on a note about the one-way street of data growth. And I've seen a number of recent articles and reports coming out that speak to this. And it's the stage with a 1-minute crash course in a data scalability. And then I think where I'm going with this conversation is think like a futurist. Where are we going? What's the direction things are headed? So here's my 1-minute crash course in data scale. So it starts with kilobytes. That's kind of the basic measure. And if you think back to the launch of the original Macintosh in 1984, it was the 128K, 128 kilobytes of RAM or memory. And that would kind of like is just, I would guess, is kind of like just one point of reference going back 35 years. Then, moving up the scale, it goes to megabytes, gigabytes. Now, Bob, you and I kind of lived in the megabyte, gigabyte world with client server technologies. That really was the realm of megabytes and gigabytes. And then terabytes and petabytes. I would say now we're in the terabyte, petabyte era. Terabytes really for the last 20 years, but you can now buy a 1 terabyte thumb drive at a retail store. And the high end, the big businesses are in the petabyte scale range now. And then it goes to exabytes and zettabytes and, my favorite, yottabytes. And beyond that, they're now talking about brontobytes and geobytes. Now, each one of these measures is about 1,000 times more than the last. And this is the direction that things are going. And we can see the progression. We can see the progression in the world of databases and cloud databases. And so just to kind of, I made the point that, the terabytes and petabytes, let's say we're in the terabyte petabyte generation now. AWS recently talked about a database migration that they did over 2 years, which was 75 petabytes. And JP Morgan Chase, the CIO, talked about how they're managing 450 petabytes of data in a hybrid cloud environment. And just one other point here on petabytes, Bob, is you remember on the last podcast, we talked about that AWS's snowmobile, right? The 18-wheeler that moves data, and that handles 100 petabytes at a time. So this is the high-end stuff. This is the world of big data in big business. And that's kind of the point we're at today.
So John, what about, these moving from the different stages here, right? And you said if we're in terabytes and petabytes, gosh, I think it was, 20, 25 years ago, but I think you had done a cover story for Information Week. I think it was called the Terabyte Club. And you had identified a handful of companies that were, now they had databases, ranging up into the terabytes. And I remember at the time, I was like, holy crap, this is science fiction level stuff. So if 25 years, you go from that to, JP Morgan Chase with 450 million petabytes. How quickly, John, are we going to move then from the into the world of exabytes and zettabytes?
Well, we're there. We're moving into the world of exabytes now, and that's where we should turn our attention for this conversation. An exabyte is, I guess, let me think. An exabyte would be 1,000 petabytes or 1,000,000 terabytes. Yeah, that's right. So Andy Jassy said that AWS has a number of customers with exabyte-sized databases. So they exist. Not only do they exist in data centers, but they exist in cloud databases, and they exist in the world of AWS. So we know that they're out there, and we're beginning to see more examples of that. Now, just recently, I saw a headline which I thought was really interesting. It involves cryptocurrency, and one in particular called Chia currency. And there was a headline that Chia currency has already crossed the 1 exabyte of storage. But Bob, what's interesting about this is it grew from 100 petabytes to an exabyte in 1 month. So you can, we weren't really thinking about that, right? That cryptocurrency was going to drive this kind of storage requirement. So that is not necessarily a database issue, but it does speak to the scale that we're talking about here. And one of the things we could talk about as we go along here is that in the world of databases, they're kind of separating and increasingly separating storage from compute power, which is kind of an architectural and a design issue that allows for scale and flexibility. So you see these emerging technologies like crypto currency driving storage. And then there are new technologies that are coming into play that are specifically meant to work with petabyte and exabyte scale. One of the companies that caught my eye is Ocient, Ocient. They're a Chicago-based startup. They got 40 million in Series B funding earlier this year, and they now have 65 million in funding. And their design point is how to ingest or take in petabyte and exabyte scale, these really large data sets. So my point here, and we could come up with other examples, but the point here is that there are database platforms that are being designed for this world of petabyte and exabyte data.
John, that is remarkable stuff here. And, that startups can come in and be able to handle scales like that is just an indication, right, that where we're headed is nothing like where we've been in the past. And I want to just follow up with you on that in a second. But first, a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/A-game. So, John, this march forward, and I guess for businesses that can capture, manage, analyze, act on, and innovate based on this data, this is wonderful. But are the challenges for how companies do that, are those rising as quickly as the volumes of data are rising?
Well, I would, the short answer is no. I would say, and one of the, I think one of the points I want to make along the way here is that it's really important that both business and technology people and managers and executives are thinking about this kind of scale. For a number of reasons. One is because their businesses need to be able to manage it, but also because it's an opportunity, right? So it's the old challenge opportunity equation here. The size of the opportunity grows with the size of the challenge. And now, what IDC tracks global data and the size of global databases. So let me just talk about that, because that's going to lead me back to your question here, Bob. Now, in their most recent report, which came out in March, IDC calls this the Datasphere. It's global data. And they measured global data in zettabytes. Okay, so we went from the terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and now when you look at it globally, you're talking zettabytes. And they said that just last year alone, 64 zettabytes of data was created or replicated, and that was a kind of a growth spurt that was partly explained by digital transformation, all the investment that companies did digitally, and the fact that so many people were working from home. So you had this growth in data. But what really caught my eye about this report was that they said that less than 2% of this data was saved or retained. So a lot of it is what they called ephemeral data. It kind of like, it kind of disappears off the screen at some point. So you have to ask yourself, whether there's value in capturing more of that data and managing it and analyzing it and optimizing it and using it to business advantage. And that's always been the name of the game, really, in business and business intelligence. So I think that getting back to your question, there is this continuing incredible growth of data volume, which businesses need to have the infrastructure and the expertise and the skill set to manage. And then also with the right algorithms and with the right strategy, extract the value from that and use it to business advantage.
Mm-hmm. So, John, you've talked about certain companies in this. Some of these databases are exclusively in the cloud now, and your Gartner citation, what, 75%, was it, of all databases, John, or of all data?
That was a reference to databases, the number of databases that will be moving to the cloud or created in the cloud by the end of next year.
Okay. And John, your assessment, because one of the things you do is track like the top 20 cloud database vendors. Are you confident that their ability, and again, coming back to the previous question, is their ability to create tools that manage, capture, analyze, and act on all this data, are those capabilities moving along at the rate of this growth? Because I think you've described here, the 2% maybe is being kept and used. So is that because only 2% of it is worth keeping and using, or are the new tools going to help companies bump that up to 4 or 10 or 20, 30%?
Well, I would say, first of all, that the state of the art in data management is largely working towards these issues of scale. So in terms of the database platforms, the analytics, I think that there are many options, every day in the industry that can address these challenges. And so you see a lot of discussion about that. And in fact, just look at some of the newer technologies that we talk about so much in the world of databases: serverless computing, self-managed autonomous databases. They address this challenge of scale. Now, your question about, to what extent will businesses want to capture more than that 2% of data? And manage it and extract value out of it. I think I think we can safely say that there's more value to be gained by, processing more of that data. Now, there does become this question of, efficiency and optimization, to the extent to which data is replicated, and decentralized can be inefficient. And also there's a question of storage capacity and costs. So there's this kind of slide rule that comes into play in measuring that value equation. But there's no, I'm pretty sure that for most businesses, there's value to be gained from really having new and best practices in what I call modern data management.
John, do you think there could be, the role of either the chief data officer, chief digital officer, or somebody in an organization, will they become like the CFO, where they're saying, making decisions about, the value of data in the same way that the CFO is helping to, set strategy, foreign policy for how financial assets are managed?
Well, that is already the case, I would say. Chief data officers, CIOs, CTOs, there is a whole class of business and technology expertise that is focused on these issues. And you can see in the world of academia even that calculations come into play on the value of data. Yeah. Data as capital and that kind of thing. So I think that the biggest businesses and the most sophisticated businesses are already in this game. What I think is next is for more mid-sized businesses and companies that have not had this level of expertise to move in this direction. And this is where we see a lot of activity now around data engineering and data science, right? They're pretty much mainstream now, and they are no longer the world of just the biggest and most sophisticated businesses.
So, John, the companies in your cloud database report, top 20, do those companies aim for only those huge global corporations, or are they developing solutions and capabilities for that mid-sized company, that company set that you just described?
Yeah, what you just said, Bob. It's one of the big trends is that is that data management is getting so sophisticated in modern data management and so capable that smaller and mid-sized businesses can get involved with tools and technologies that let them do this without, the big departments of specialists working kind of behind, a screen of some kind. So and a design point for many of these technologies is, in fact, to make them more accessible to more businesses and more people. We talked about that Snowflake is trying to do that. Oracle had an announcement for what they call citizen data scientists. You may remember that. And so this is been a challenge really from the time I've been covering business intelligence and analytics going back 25 years, is getting powerful tools into the hands of more people. And we're definitely making progress on that front.
All right. And John, I thought you had an interesting number showing uh, contrasting in some ways business data and consumer data.
Yeah, well, this is once again credit to IDC and their report. But according to IDC, what they call the enterprise data sphere, so this is business data, it will grow 2 times faster than the consumer data sphere. Why? It's because of the role of cloud for storage and consumption. So businesses are using the cloud for storing and consuming data. Oh, another interesting takeaway from that report was that um, data created in the cloud is not growing as fast as data stored in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So, we live, every day with data sets and streaming data in the cloud, a lot of data, but more data is being stored in the cloud than is being created in the cloud, which is once again gets back to that Gartner forecast that we've been talking about, which is this trend towards moving data in the cloud. And you and I talked about this last time, which is why we see that hybrid clouds are going to be around for a long time, because many businesses have data on premises. They see the value in moving data to the cloud, and those things have to have a handshake. They have to work together.
Yeah, John, I'm always puzzled in some ways on earnings calls when some of the financial analysts always express surprise at when some of the tech vendors say that their on-premise business is still, flat or growing, in low single digits. And there's an assumption, I believe, that, everything is just suddenly going to flip over to the cloud. But I think there's still quite a long, long way to go with that. And um, the point you're making here about that more data is stored in the cloud than currently is created in the cloud goes to show that right now the sort of the highest value is coming from the data storage area, but soon as more and more of the business operations are moved over into cloud-based systems, then that creation factor will start to rise up as well, huh?
Yeah, and kind of, well, a couple of things I would say about that. We know that businesses want to store data in the cloud. We know that modern data platforms are cloud oriented, if not cloud. Some are cloud only, some are hybrid, but they're all in the cloud in one form or another. So businesses want to store data in the cloud. The platforms are in the cloud, and the data just keeps growing. Now, we talked about terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and zettabytes. Where we look next in this conversation, Bob, is yottabytes. And I once wrote an article headlined, "Are you ready for yottabytes?" You'll remember that. And it really was a look way into the future. And even now, we don't hear that much about yottabyte scale, but it is a thing. The one example I remember was that the federal government announced something called the Brain Initiative. And they said that it was what it sounds like. It was research into the human brain. And they said that the data created by that project could get into the yottabytes. So that's out there. Now, I just saw a headline this week that caught my attention, and it kind of is looking way out there. But the headline is "The World's Data Explained: How Much We're Producing and Where It's All Stored." And this is written by a researcher and lecturer in physics with the University of Portsmouth in England. And he looks 500 years into the future with these trends. Okay, so this is, like I said, this is what you might call a long-term projection here. But his premise, his thesis, hypothesis is that 150 years from now, the number of digital bits will exceed the number of atoms on Earth. And that in 500 years, there'll be so much information that it will that digital content will account for half of the Earth's mass, creating, and his term is an information catastrophe. And he puts it kind of in the same ballpark as, environmental challenges, energy and population challenges that the world face. Now, that scenario is way out there, but I do think it gets to my main point, which is that the digital content and data and database management are all going to be tested, for years and generations to come, and we have to be good at it. And I have a few takeaways from this, but Bob, I don't know if you wanted to ask me about, the information catastrophe before I do that.
John, in some ways, I'm intrigued by it because I have to give that researcher credit. He's found a hook that gets people's attention. But I would prefer, John, that we set that aside for a second, and you go ahead with your major insights.
Yeah, so I have some takeaways from all of this. Okay, so I'm kind of like bringing the discussion home, so to speak. For 3 points. First, companies need to be aware of and prepare for rapid data growth. And so, 10 times data growth is like training wheels. 100 times, 1,000 times data growth, because as you can see in these examples I gave at the beginning of our conversation, it's 1,000 times each time you move up the ladder here. So many companies are still managing terabytes of data, but the terabytes add up to petabytes, and then we know where it goes from there. 2, the importance of developing expertise around big data in the cloud. This is happening right now. This is what's going on. How to distribute, manage, migrate, replicate, optimize, analyze petabytes and exabytes of data. And someone in the company needs to be thinking about this and developing skill sets and plans around it. And then the third point I would make is there are these new data architectures and solutions that we're hearing a lot about. They're coming up every week now. Serverless is one of them, which, as I said earlier, is all about auto scaling so that you don't have to manage your own database clusters. I also mentioned the decoupling of compute and storage, which is a trend in cloud databases, a way of bringing increased flexibility and scale to these big data environments, and then also self-managing autonomous databases. So, and there are other things as well, but there are a bunch of technologies and data architecture that come into play as part of this scale discussion.
John, that's great advice there, I think. And I wonder if, somebody could, with perfect clarity and visibility, ever find a company like, there's a company that overestimated its needs for, data management. I haven't run into anybody that's had that challenge yet, John. So, but the preparation, the need for it. And I thought it was interesting what you said too, that the IDC study broke out. There was the business data sphere and the consumer data sphere. Could you just quickly touch on that, John? Because I understand the business data sphere and the data that they're creating. So what is it we do as consumers that generates half as much data as businesses are creating?
Well, so IDC measures both the amount of data that's being created and the amount of data that's being stored. Okay, so I'm not sure that that it's being created faster by businesses than it is by consumers, but it is being but it's being stored. More of
Stored.
it is being
Okay.
stored, right? Now, but since you asked, Bob, IDC says that the two things that are the fastest growing data set segments are IoT data and social media. Okay, so IoT, I guess I would say lives in both worlds, partly business, partly consumer, and social media does as well, really. But I'm guessing the lion's share of the social media data is consumer generated. That would be my guess. I didn't get into the details on that, but you can see that just tremendous amount of data being created, but much of it is ephemeral, short-lived. It's cached and it's gone, within hours or days. So that's part of the equation as well. Really, I think the question is how much of it needs to be captured, how much of it might be captured, and then how businesses are going to be really good at doing that.
Yeah. And John, good question. How are businesses going to get the skills to master that, to know where to place their bets, where to place their investments around this? And John, if in closing, we could just come back to the information catastrophe that'll hit in 500 years. I would just, because when I first saw that, I was, gosh, am I ever going to sleep again? Worried about what's going to happen in 2050, or wait, 2500, sorry. But then, John, I thought, something that you pointed out a little while ago was you were talking about gigabytes. There's now gigabyte thumb drives. So I believe that over these intervening 500 years, there's going to be some pretty remarkable innovations and inventions and discoveries that allow us to move forward without having half the earth taken up by, was it content or storage?
Oh, well, yeah. So the point of the report was that the volume of digital information will take up more than half the size of the planet.
Okay.
And that is what this researcher Melvin Vopson refers to as the information catastrophe. I think to your point, the big unknown is what changes between now and then in terms of the technologies. For example, we already know that you can put databases into space. So if you are storing your digital, assets in satellites in outer space, maybe that becomes less of an issue for those of us here on planet Earth. And there's quantum computing as well, and other technologies. I mean, I really didn't get into a close review of both the challenge that's being laid out and the possible solutions. But I think, after 25 years in the industry, I have a sense that there will be new approaches that can kind of lessen the impact that is outlined here.
Yeah. I think the professor might have been watching too many, evening local weather reports where, it's either like, oh my God, it's going to be 80 degrees and stay indoors, or, oh my gosh, it's going to be 20 degrees, stay indoors. I think that might have creeped in on him a little bit here, but still it's fascinating as he, pushes us to think about stuff. And John, right in line with your, I think, cogent and forward-looking analysis and understanding of what's happening here in one of the most interesting and valuable and important parts of the whole tech industry, John. So thanks very much for sharing some of your thoughts today.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I enjoyed it and look forward to talking to you again.
Good deal, John. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live. get a chance to catch up on John Foley, things not only happening in cloud data management today, but over the next 5 centuries. More to come in the future. We'll see you again next time.